The desert wind blew hot and angry across the dusty auction yard. The sun was sinking low, turning the sky the color of blood. Men gathered with whiskey breath and greedy eyes, their voices coarse and cruel. Behind the wooden fence stood a woman, tall as a horse's back, shoulders broad, wrists thick with rope burns. Her bare feet pressed against the dry earth, and her black hair hung like a heavy curtain over her face. They called her the Apache Giantess. Rumor had it she was born of thunder, that she could lift a bull by the horns. To some she was a monster, to others a miracle, but to the crowd that day she was nothing more than meat for sale. The auctioneer slammed his cane against the post. "Big one here, boys. Too big to breed, too strong to tame. Government don't want her, slaughterhouse does." The men laughed. Coins clinked. Someone spat in the dirt. She stood still, her dark eyes calm, even as they measured her like cattle. Her name, though no one bothered to ask, was Tyre, which in her tongue meant perfect thunder. She had been captured weeks ago when her people's camp was raided near the Salt River. The others had escaped into the mountains, but she'd stayed behind to protect her injured sister. Now she stood in chains, silent and unbroken. And among the crowd that day stood Eli Carter, a cowboy from Texas, lean, quiet, the kind of man who spoke only when it mattered. He had ridden for days across the desert with his horse, Rusty, after delivering a herd of longhorns. He didn't plan to stop at the auction. He was just passing through. But something in that woman's stillness made him pull the reins. When the crowd roared with laughter, Eli felt his stomach twist. He'd seen cruelty before, but this was worse. This wasn't war. This was humiliation. $2 a pound, yelled the butcher from Yuma. "Ha! You'll get a feast out of her," someone shouted. Tyre's eyes flashed once, sharp as lightning. The men stepped back uneasy. Eli dismounted slowly. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way she held her head, proud even with ropes around her wrists. Maybe it was because no one else saw her as human. The auctioneer barked again, going once, going twice. $50, Eli said. The laughter stopped. Every head turned toward him, a dusty stranger in a sun-faded hat, boots crusted with trail dust. "Who said that?" The auctioneer squinted. Eli stepped forward. "I'll take her." "Not for meat." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The butcher scowled. "You a fool, cowboy? She'll break your bones before she plows your field." Eli's voice stayed calm. "Maybe, but at least she'll be free." The auctioneer shrugged. "50 and she's yours. Take the monster." He dropped the coins on the table. The clatter echoed like thunder. When the chains came off, Tyre didn't move. She stared at him, tall enough that her shadow swallowed his boots. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. "You speak Apache?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. He handed her a canteen. "Drink, you'll need it." She hesitated, then took it, water running down her cracked lips. For the first time, she looked at him, not with fear but curiosity. They left the yard together. The crowd jeered behind them. Someone shouted, "Better sleep with one eye open, cowboy." But Eli didn't look back. They camped by a dry riverbed that night. The moon was a thin silver knife in the sky. Tyre sat across the fire, silent, her wrists still raw from the ropes. Eli cooked beans in a dented tin pot, trying not to stare at her size. Her arms were thick with muscle, her posture proud, almost royal. He broke the silence. "Name's Eli?" She didn't respond. He nodded slowly. "You don't trust me. I get it." After a moment she spoke, her voice deep, steady, with the rhythm of her people's language. "Why did you buy me?" Eli looked into the fire. "Because no one else saw what I did." "And what did you see?" He met her eyes. "A woman, not an animal." For a moment the desert seemed to hold its breath. The wind carried the smell of sage and smoke. Tyre studied him, his worn hands, his tired eyes. He wasn't like the others. She could see it. Still, she stayed guarded. "I cannot go back," she said finally. "My tribe has moved on." Eli nodded. "Then you can ride with me until you figure where you want to go." She frowned. "You are not afraid?" He smirked faintly. "Lady, I've ridden bulls meaner than most men. I'll take my chances. For the first time, Taya almost smiled. Days turned into weeks. They rode together, through canyons and ghost towns, across the wide-open plains where the sky stretched forever. She learned to speak his language little by little. He taught her to ride, though she quickly proved she didn't need teaching. At night, by the fire, he'd tell stories of Texas, of his mother's old ranch before it burned down in a drought. She would listen quietly, her face glowing in the firelight. But one evening, as they camped near an old mining town, riders came, men from the auction yard. The butcher from Yuma was among them. "There she is," he shouted. "That's my property, Carter. You stole her." Eli rose, hand on his revolver. "You sold her. She's free," the butcher sneered. "Not by law. Big ones like her, they don't get freedom." Taya stepped forward. Her shadow stretched long and dark across the sand. "You call me beast," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "But I see who the beasts are." The men hesitated. Something in her tone made their horses back away. Eli's fingers tightened on the trigger. "You heard the lady. Leave," the butcher spat. "You'll regret this, cowboy." Then he turned his horse and rode off into the dark. When the dust settled, Eli exhaled. "Guess word's out now. They'll come looking." Taya looked toward the horizon, where the stars glowed like embers. "Let them come," she said. "They cannot kill what already walked through fire." That night, as the fire burned low, Eli realized he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He needed her strength, her courage, her silence that said more than words ever could. And though the world saw her as a giantess, he saw her for what she truly was, a woman shaped by survival, standing tall in a world that wanted to break her. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain: he would stand beside her, no matter the cost. The next morning, the desert was still and silver with dawn. Taya sat on a rock, sharpening a knife she'd made from an old wagon spring. Eli saddled the horses in silence. Neither spoke about the men from the night before, but both knew they'd be back. Eli's voice was low. "We can ride north through the mountains. There's a settlement in Prescott. Sheriff there don't ask many questions." Taya looked toward the rising sun. "Running makes us pray." He glanced at her. "Then what do you suggest?" She turned her eyes to the desert horizon, endless and cruel. "We stop running. We fight." Eli gave a small, crooked grin. "You sound like a soldier." "I have been one," she said simply. By midday, they reached a canyon, deep and narrow, with red stone walls and an old mining shack half buried in dust. It was the perfect place to make a stand. They set traps, stacked stones for cover, and waited. Taya moved with quiet focus, her body a shadow against the rocks. Eli watched her strength. The way she carried heavy logs like feathers, her hands steady, her eyes sharp. "You ever think about going back to your people?" he asked while she tied a rope. She paused. "If they still live, they would not know me now. The world changed me. Men changed me." Eli's throat tightened. "Then maybe it's time you get to choose who you'll be next." She looked at him, really looked. "And you? What do you choose, cowboy?" He hesitated. "To stop wandering." Something passed between them then, quiet, strong, like the earth itself taking a breath. That night, the riders came. There were 6 of them, led by the butcher from Yuma. Their torches flickered against the canyon walls. "Carter," the butcher bellowed. "You can hand her over or we'll burn this place and take you both." Eli cocked his rifle. "Guess they chose the hard way." He looked at Taya. "You ready?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Born ready." The first shot cracked through the canyon. The echo rolled like thunder. Horses screamed. Dust filled the air. Taya moved like a storm, grabbing one man by the coat, throwing him against the rocks. Another charged, but she swung her heavy arm and sent him sprawling. The butcher tried to draw his gun, but Eli fired first, a clean shot to the shoulder. When the smoke cleared, 2 horses had bolted, 3 men were groaning on the ground, and the butcher lay trembling against the dirt. Eli stepped closer, rifle still aimed. "You ride back to Yuma and tell him she's under my protection." You come again. You won't ride back at all." The butcher's face was pale. He nodded quickly, clutching his bleeding arm. "She's cursed," he spat. "You'll regret this." Taya's voice was cold. "No curse. Just justice." The men fled into the night, their torches vanishing one by one. When it was over, Eli sank down by the fire, rubbing his shoulder. "Well," he said with a half-smile, "that was one hell of a fight." Taya sat beside him, her breath steady. "You fight well?" "For a man who says little," he chuckled. "And you fight like a legend." For a while they sat in silence, listening to the coyotes cry in the distance. The stars stretched wide above them, wild and endless. "Eli," she said softly, "why risk your life for me?" He turned to her. "Because no one ever risked theirs for me." Her gaze lingered on him, that quiet man who saw her not as a beast, but as a woman worth saving. She touched his hand, hesitant at first, then certain. His rough fingers closed around hers. For the first time in years, Taya felt warmth that wasn't from fire or sun. Weeks passed. They built a small camp by the canyon stream, a place the world had forgotten. Eli hunted and fixed old tools from the mine. Taya wove baskets, taught him words in her language, laughed when he mispronounced them. At night, he'd hum old cowboy songs and she'd listen, her heart strangely light. Once, he brought her a wildflower from the ridge, small, yellow, fragile against her palm. "For you," he said shyly. She smiled, truly smiled, and tucked it behind her ear. "In my tribe," she said, "a man gives a flower when he speaks truth." "And what truth's that?" he asked. "That he has chosen." Eli's voice softened. "Then I've chosen right." But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. One morning, a troop of soldiers rode through the valley, the same men who had once raided her tribe. They carried orders to round up escaped hostiles. Eli saw them first. "We've got company," he whispered. Taya's face hardened. "They will not take me again." He nodded. "Then we make sure they don't." They took their rifles and climbed to the ridge. When the soldiers approached, dust rising behind them, Eli shouted, "This land's private. Turn back!" The captain sneered. "We're here for the Apache woman." "Step aside, cowboy." Eli didn't move. "She's not yours to take." The soldier raised his gun. "Then you'll die for her." The first bullet hit the rock beside him. Eli fired back. The canyon roared with gunfire. Taya leapt from the ridge, shouting in Apache, her knife flashing. Horses reared. Men screamed. When the dust cleared, the soldiers lay scattered, wounded retreating. Eli's arm was bleeding, but he was alive. Taya rushed to him, pressing her hands against his wound. "You should not have fought for me." He looked up, pain fading into a tired smile. "Couldn't do anything else." Tears glimmered in her eyes, something rare, something deep. "You are a fool, Eli Carter." "Yeah," he whispered, "you're fool." They buried their weapons in the canyon and left the next morning. The West was too small for peace, and they both knew it. They rode north, toward the tall pines and quiet rivers where no one knew their names. One evening, they reached a valley filled with wildflowers. Eli stopped his horse. "What do you think?" Taya looked around, the grass golden, the wind gentle, the sky wide open. "It feels like the world forgot this place." "Then it's ours," he said. She dismounted and stood beside him, her shadow tall across the field. He reached for her hand. "You ever think we'd make it this far?" She smiled faintly. "Not in this life." He squeezed her hand. "Then maybe we're living the next one already." Years later, travelers spoke of a ranch hidden deep in the northern valleys, run by a tall woman and a quiet cowboy. They said she could lift a steer with one arm, that her laughter carried down the mountains. Some said she was the Apache Giantess who once escaped the butcher's yard. But the truth was simpler. She wasn't a legend or a monster. She was just Taya Carter, a woman who had found freedom, and a man who had finally found home. And in the vast silence of the Wild West, their story lived on, whispered by the wind, carried by the stars.